So when developers think about their stack, and my background is as a developer, we often describe it like it was designed as the perfect system. If you jump on Reddit in the WordPress Reddit forum, then there's lots of people out there saying, oh, I found this brand new stack, or I've got this set of plugins and it's just fantastic and it works and all that sort of stuff. And that's great. But if we're honest, most stacks aren't really designed as a perfect stack anyway. They kind of grow. A feature gets added because it solves a real problem. A tool gets introduced because it speeds something up. A shortcut gets taken because there's a deadline. We all know about that one. That's probably the biggest one. And none of these decisions are inherently wrong. But over time, the stack that you use becomes slightly different than what we maybe intended initially. It becomes a record of kind of past pressure points. So deadlines, client needs, ecosystem changes, even. And that's kind of things I'm going to be discussing tonight. So if you've been building WordPress sites for a while, your stack probably already tells that story. And that's the background image, is the layers, the sediment layers. That's kind of how I think about a lot of WordPress stacks. So have a think about yourself. Does your current stack feel more designed or assembled over time? So the goal of this talk really is it's not to find the right stack. It's not to find the perfect stack. It's to understand how stacks drift and how to make some good decisions to reduce that regret of decision later on, to really future-proofing your stack. If you've been working in WordPress long enough, your stack probably mirrors the broader ecosystem. Mine certainly does. I initially started with the Genesis framework in that particular era. Yes, I'm very, very old. At the time, Genesis was fantastic. It gave structure, predictable architecture, and it had a very, very strong developer ecosystem round about it. And then after a few years, the industry shifted. Clients wanted faster delivery, easier editing. So I moved into page builders. First, Beaver Builder. Then eventually I settled on Elementor, which at the time was innovating much faster than Beaver. And around 2021, about 5 years ago, I started splitting my stack depending on the type of client I was working with. So for the non-technical clients, I stayed with Hello and Elementor, the Hello theme with Elementor Pro. For more technical builds, though, I moved towards Generate Press and Generate Blocks. Now, the non-technical clients, they loved Elementor. It's drag and drop. They understand the interface. They can build stuff, and that's great. But there was always this question of speed, technical debt. But the trade-off between them being able to update and maintain the website was good enough. But for those kind of technical users that understood speed limitations and technical depth, they wanted something a little bit more fast, a little bit more towards the WordPress core. So if they could handle Generate Press and Generate Blocks and using the WordPress block editor, then that's the stack that I used with them. And that worked. That worked very well. Right now, I'm experimenting with a new stack. So it's the Frost theme and Green Shift blocks, which feels like another shift in the whole ecosystem, the whole journey that we as developers and designers go on. This stack not only embraces block editing, it adds subtle animations, and it adds things like fluid design and fluid typography. So again, a kind of shift, a drift into a new ecosystem, a new way of supporting things. And the interesting thing is, none of these decisions I made were wrong. Each one solved the problems I had at that particular moment. So how many of you, I wonder, recognize part of that journey, maybe on your own stack? Feel free to add comments in the chat at any time, and we can go through them at the end. But certainly for me, over the years, my stack has drifted and accumulated. So I've never had the perfect stack. I've always had a good stack that solved the needs of the current situation. So stacks evolve alongside the ecosystem that WordPress runs in. They're responses to changing constraints, not permanent architectural things. So even all these people on Reddit that have the perfect stack, when they mention it, that they've dialed in, a perfect WordPress stack, that really means it's perfect for them, and it's perfect for them right now. So yeah, just have a think about that. If we zoom out a bit, the ecosystem itself has moved through some definite phases. Thesis and Genesis, they gave us the structured theme systems with hooks and filters to control layout and modify data. The goal in that particular era was predictability and structure. As developers and designers, we want to know that when we build a website, it's not going to fall apart. And Genesis and Thesis give us that kind of solid structure to do that. But then things changed and we moved into the builder era. Tools like Divi, Visual Studio, the early page builder implementers, then Beaver and Elementor, and of course the many more of them now. Oxygen, Bricks, I can't even name them all now, there's heaps. The priority shifted into speed of building and client editing. So whereas before the framework for development, WordPress was in that last era, was very dependent on developers. Clients would go to developers to make changes, and that was the way it was. This page builder era has moved into speed of building for us as businesses. So us as developers and designers to build websites quicker for more profit. And also to allow the client to edit their own websites without having to come back the whole load of change requests. So a different shift, a different era. Then we started seeing what I call the hybrid era, hybrid approaches. So themes like GeneratePress Pro with block systems, performance-based stacks, or speedy web pages. So we kind of moved into this idea that we need real speed, for SEO performance, for organic results. Everything needed to be really, really speedy. And if you're using a page builder, then that meant it was wrapping around lots of divs, and it was, oh my God, 3 microseconds extra for one page request. And that was really bad. So we kind of moved to this hybrid approach of mostly using the block editor, but not really a block theme. It's these GeneratePress is kind of what we call a hybrid theme between classic and blocks. So it's really trying to balance that kind of flexibility with us still in control as developers and designers, and have control, but also with the flexibility for the client to be able to do stuff themselves as well. And now we seem to be entering what definitely looks like the block ecosystem era. So block themes, design systems, composable blocks, block patterns. That is the way that WordPress is going at the moment. And one thing I've noticed over time is that you can often tell the age of a WordPress stack by how many layers it's accumulated, what types of plugins and what types of themes that the developers are using at that particular time. Older stacks, they tend to have framework layers, then maybe a builder layer bolted on, then plugin ecosystem layer, and now sometimes a block layer on top of that. I don't know what you guys are. I don't know if you are developers or designers, but I've certainly come across many client websites that have all of them stacked on top of each other. And that's okay. It works or worked for them. That's just the journey that people have made. So it's not uncommon for clients to be building pages with Elementor and writing blog posts with just the block editor. And that's very common nowadays. And again, none of these layers are wrong individually. They were usually right choice at that particular time. But over years, the stack has kind of like a geological record of the WordPress ecosystem itself. By looking at an older client, you can usually see when that website was built and when it stopped being maintained and supported in that particular plugins and themes and code snippets version. But the key insight here isn't which era is or was the best. It's this. Every stack feels clean before it accumulates the history or moves on to the next era. So looking at that timeline, I wonder, where does your stack fit in? If you want to, you can pop the answer in the chat. Are you still in frameworks era? Hopefully not. Are you on builder? Have you kind of moved to hybrid, or are you completely embracing the block era with blocks, with block themes and block editing? Let's talk about complexity. So when developers imagine complexity, we imagine big architectural mistakes. So if a client comes to you and their website is super complicated, you assume that it's been built that way. And oh my goodness, how could a client have made this decision, or a developer made this awful decision that now this system is teetering on the edge of blowing up? But that's rarely how things happen. Complexity usually arrives very quietly. So a tool gets added because it solves a gap. Another one appears because it does something slightly better than the other one did. Each step is perfectly reasonable when you make them in that time, but those steps interact in a way that we didn't plan, or the original developer or developers didn't plan. And eventually, the signal appears as something subtle, and that's called hesitation. So you open part of the system, part of the WordPress, and you think, I'd rather not touch that bit today. So most complex WordPress systems, they didn't start out complex. They started out nice and clean, but each project or update adds a small decision, a plugin for forms, another plugin for conditional logic, a plugin for automation, another plugin to connect to Facebook ads, etc., etc., etc. Each step is rational in their own, but those decisions interact with each other in ways that we just did not initially plan for, or even the client planned for. Complex systems usually form from reasonable decisions, but made under pressure. People need to get things done. Landing page needs to be fixed. Something breaks, so a new plugin's added. That sort of stuff. It's never planned as a complex beast. It just evolves into one over time. So I wonder, are there parts of a site that you hesitate before touching? One of your own, maybe a client one. But the key point really is the hesitation of going in to change something is usually, or often, the first signal of stack drift. It's when you don't want to change something because it might break. That's usually, okay, my stack's changed here. It's now out of my control, or it's drifting towards something else. Pavel says, I use Elementor Pro still, or prefer clean Gutenberg. Yep, I'm still in that phase as well. Okay, so here's a little story, maybe a couple of stories. A few years ago, I inherited a WordPress site that had been built by several developers over time. Now, nothing was obviously broken. The site worked fine as is. The client was happy-ish enough, but they knew it was time to update. Things hadn't been updated in a long time, and now it had become a governance issue in that it'd been passed to different groups within the client's organization. And in each successive group, they told the next one, don't update because the whole thing will fall apart. So it got to this stage where it's very fragile, complex beast. So when I looked under the hood, the stack itself told the complete story. The theme had originally been built on a framework. It was still using Genesis that was popular at the time. But later on, a builder, page builder, site builder had been thrown in. In fact, 3 of them had been. It had SiteGround editor, it had WP Bakery, which was the old Visual Studio, and Elementor was in there as well. And they were added so that the users could add or change pages easily over time, because the original way, the framework, the Genesis framework, was just too complicated for them. Need to get a developer in. Then a set of plugins had been added to solve other specific problems: forms, automation, integration, layout helpers, all that sort of stuff. And every decision was made sense when it was made initially by all these different groups that were using the website at that time. But over time, the stack had become completely layered and out of control. There were multiple ways to build layouts. There was multiple places where styles could be defined. Several plugins were doing overlapping things. And the most interesting signal wasn't a particular error. It was that hesitation for them to upgrade WordPress core, to upgrade plugins, because the previous people had done that and it had all gone boom. So developers working on the site, if they were brought in, they would pause before touching certain parts of it because they didn't really know what it was, why it was there, if it was needed. If they took it out, it would fall over. And that's when you kind of realize something important, that stack drift itself doesn't announce itself. It just kind of shows up as what we call uncertainty or hesitancy. So the site worked, it didn't produce any errors, but it was teetering on that edge. And that's when your stack stops feeling like a tool and starts feeling more like a system that you're carefully avoiding breaking. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but I've definitely experienced that in lots of builds and lots of clients projects that I've taken on, done an audit of the website and went, "Ooh, let's have a talk about this." So most developers have probably inherited something like that at some time that just feels like, if you touch it or change one small thing, it might break another 5 things. So here's another true story. I once had a client say something to me that really stuck. They said, "Don't take a backup of the site. It will crash the site." And I was just like, okay. Now, obviously, that's not how backups are made to work. But that sentence actually told me something really, really important, that the site had reached a point where every technical action felt dangerous, even to the point where taking a backup of the website itself was an issue. So therefore, nothing else could be done because, well, if you can't rely on backups, what else can you touch? And when a system reaches that point, that doesn't really matter whether the fear is technically correct or not. It's just teetering on the edge. That stack has already lost complete trust in the client, and they know that something needs to be done. So yeah, that was an interesting project to do, and I'm happy to chat about that later or separately if people want to figure out what happened in the end. This is one of the most common forms of stack drift. A plugin solves a problem, but introduces dependencies. You install a form plugin, then you add an automation plugin, then maybe a CRM integration to that, and maybe email automation. Suddenly, the system isn't just WordPress anymore. It's now an application layer built from plugins. It's very easy to get locked into vendor-specific dependencies as well in your stack. Take the Fluent ecosystem, for example. I'm not picking on them. I'm not saying it's bad. I actually use a lot of Fluent stuff, but just be aware of that. So within Fluent, you've got Fluent Forms, Fluent CRM, Fluent SMTP, Fluent Cart, Fluent Community, Fluent Support. There's all this stuff, and they all interconnect with each other, which is great. But one of the main issues with stack drift is that you have these dependencies. So each piece works well individually. They're meant to work well together, but operationally, that dependency is a real issue. If one component changes, then it could break the entire workflow. So just be very, very wary of being locked into what I call that kind of vendor-specific dependency. And so plugin ecosystems, they can quietly become mini SaaS platforms inside WordPress when they're connecting out to all these things. They're bringing in data from other places. They're automating into a flow out to several different bigger systems. So WordPress can easily evolve into its own platform in itself. And that's not always bad, but it does change your risk profile if you're the one that's maintaining that website over time, or if you're the developer that's being brought in to update or change things. Okay. Now, developers often optimize for flexibility. That is more options, more ways to build something. It feels like insurance against future requirements. But every option adds something invisible, a decision surface, a risk area. Now, there are more ways to solve the same problem, more configuration paths, more interactions between systems at small scale. Adding different options seems empowering. You're giving the client all these different options, and developers are often keep multiple systems available just in case. So some example patterns of this is block editor, site builder, shortcodes, custom templates. Maybe from a data point of view, it's ACF, custom tables, and plugin meta. From a design point of view, it might be theme options, builder styles, block styles, theme.json. So each one creates multiple paths, basically to solve the same problem, but now you're accumulating a layered system with more risk on it. So given lots of options sounds like a good idea from a development point of view. It sounds like flexibility, but it's often just kind of delayed decision making. You're not really digging down to what do you need, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client? What do you actually need? Not giving somebody 1,000 options just in case they might decide to pivot one way. So just another thought for you. Does your stack feel more freeing or more demanding these days? Are you providing more than is really needed just because you think it's flexible? Or are you reining your stack in so it's really tight and manageable? Optionality is powerful, but it has a maintenance cost that shows up later on down the line. Builders, page builders, site builders. Builder lock-in is a bit of a sensitive topic, but it's very, very real. Builders, page builders, site builders, whatever you want to call them, often store layout logic within their own structures. So if you were to look at the HTML in the WordPress content in the database, they use their own sections, containers, widgets, shortcodes. That means content becomes builder content. So again, if you're looking at that WP content within the database, you'll see lots of divs, lots of spans, lots of classes, lots of IDs. And it kind of moving away from that later on becomes extremely expensive, not just for you as a developer designer, but for the client as well. They start to hear words like complete rewrite or complete rebuild, and they're like, oh, that's expensive. And it is. So some examples of those that I've certainly came across over times is Genesis. We were talking all the way back in that structured theme era. Genesis was actually very easy migration because it mostly retained the content within the WordPress classic editor. And it just moved data around really with theme parts. So actually migrating from Genesis to something else was really easy because the content was content. Then we think about page builders, site builders. That's really hard. My first introduction to that was a Divi website, and they wanted to move away from Divi to something else. I can't remember what it was. But if you look at the content, the actual content that's stored in the database, there's thousands of shortcodes within there. Divi uses a lot of shortcodes to show and hide and manipulate stuff. So again, the actual content is buried within all that structure. So it's difficult conversation to have with the client. You can say, look, all that content's got to be rewritten. I can't pull it out, and that's going to be expensive. So therefore, you're the next phase of this website, the next rebuild, you've got to stick with Divi, or you've got to stick with X page builder, and that's your page builder lock-in, and it's difficult. Site builder layouts, they usually require a complete redesign because one system doesn't support the other system. So, and the content's all messed up. So builder lock-ins is a real thing. Companies really do double down on stack locking. So some bundled ecosystems like, but not exclusively Elementor. So I'm thinking about Elementor just now, and as Pavel was saying, he uses Elementor Pro. I use Elementor Pro, but it's easy to get locked into that system, and it's not always a bad thing. It's just something to be aware of if you're a developer designer. So thinking about Elementor, it's not just Elementor. I'm not just picking on them because it's bad, and it's because it's something I know. Elementor now offer hosting. They offer the builder. They offer AI tools, AI credits. They offer plugins. They offer cloud services. They're building it into something called, there's a new product called Elementor One which incorporates many of these things into an overall system. It's not, so it's very easy to kind of get locked in. It increases your convenience as a developer. You all the stuff at hand, you know it, but it also increases the exit cost. So thinking back to that timeline slide that I had, all the different eras, what happens in 2 or 5 years' time when the client needs to move away from this current stack they're in because the ecosystem has evolved, they can no longer get developers, that particular stack's no longer supported. It increases that exit cost. So that's something for you to think about when you're building websites for a client at the moment. What's the exit cost of being locked into your particular stack that you're developing that website with? So key insight from this one is convenience today often becomes migration cost tomorrow, as in a few years' time. So have you ever avoided leaving a tool, a stack, because the migration was too high? For example, that Divi example that I gave. Would you go to a client and say, look, it's going to take 6 months to rip out all that content, do it again. Let's just stick with what you've got at the moment and we'll just build around it. More layers, more risk surface. Certainly happened to me a few times. There's another pattern developers fall into, trying to eliminate future regret by designing for every single scenario. So you build a system that can handle everything, all the things, edge cases, future growth, every hypothetical requirement. Your stack does it all. And on paper, the architecture looks beautiful. But in real projects, something strange happens. The system becomes more sophisticated than the actual problem it's trying to solve. I actually came across this for a client that I've been looking after. They wanted me to update the theme, and I said, yeah, no problem. I've been looking after the website, WordPress maintenance, updating plugins. Now they wanted to update the website because their developer agency is no longer communicating with them. So I downloaded the theme, had a look at it, and it was a complete bespoke agency build. These builds that use, they compile the SaaS and they have JS repositories and they build all the system. That's what it was. And it was beautiful to look at. And the architecture, the file structure, it was outside the WP content. It was beautiful. But I couldn't do anything because that was the build, the compiled build that they'd given to the client. And I didn't have any of the source code. So sure, I could have recreated all that stuff that brings down dependencies and stuff, but it was too complicated. So I had to say to the client, I can't do that, and I need to rewrite some of this. Or I go and hack some stuff and it breaks all these other things because I don't have the original source code. So these types of agency builds, it was they kind of cater for everything, any type of client, any type of request, it's there. They just build a button and they've got a library for that and they've got a function for that. And you end up maintaining an infrastructure that your main projects really need. You're maintaining this beast, this complex beast, just for a simple problem. So when your stack outgrows and it's more sophisticated than the problem that you're trying to solve, the project you're trying to deliver to the client, that's a big red signal. That's called over-engineering. So developers build systems for scenarios that just don't happen, and that's wrong. So sometimes we build systems that are more sophisticated than the problems to solve, and that again is stack drift, but from a perspective of over-engineering that. Just wondering if anyone's ever built something just in case that never actually arrived. Do you deploy your system that has 5 different option pages, but your client only adds 1 or doesn't even use them at all? So the key point of this, the key takeaway for this one is that professional judgment isn't just about preparing everything. It's about preparing what actually happens most of the time. It's using judgment call to say, right, I will apply the stack to fix the problem. I'm not going to apply my entire everything stack to fix this tiny problem. So a bit of thought there. Almost there, almost getting towards the end. Stack drift really announces itself. I think we've made that clear from some of the some of the slides, it kind of shows up in small signals here and there. When updates feel dangerous, when developers avoid touching parts of the system. There's multiple ways to achieve the same outcome. Workarounds become part of normal development. You're not going to touch that, but someone else has put a layer of code or code snippet that avoids it. Or one of my favorite ones early on, when I was working for, or when we had another company, we had to look at an e-commerce build, and it had custom plugins, and there was this if-else statement that kind of went about 4 miles off to your right if you looked at the code. And within it, there was this section, and it had a comment that says, I have no idea what this section does, but it's probably important, so don't touch it. What? Yeah. So this is when workarounds become part of your normal development. And obviously new developers like I was kind of struggle to understand what the hell is going on, what is going on. So stack drift is usually a feeling before it becomes a failure. So it's a build-up, small signals. So it's being able to spot those as developers and designers when you're taking on client projects is an important skill to have. A little bit about maintenance. When we're thinking about WordPress maintenance, when you're doing the project, so if you get a new client, you get this new project, the build phases are relatively short in relation to the maintenance phases, which are usually quite long. So a site might take weeks or months to build, but it might be alive for years, many, many years. And that's where stack decisions are really reveal their cost. That's when the right decision is a good decision. Clients come back asking for new landing pages, design tweaks, performance fixes, new integrations, yada, yada, yada. Then the system requires updates, bug fixes, dealing with unexpected behavior because of the 10 new plugins that have been added that weren't originally meant to be in there. Some stacks might absorb these changes easily, or you might get the feeling that everything is okay because the website hasn't fallen over, but internally it's grinding to a halt, as in that example I gave with the guy that said, don't perform any backups because it'll kill the website. And other stacks will fight every change that you try and make them. So when stacks drift, developers usually experience it as a technical friction, but clients usually experience it very differently. They experience it as a cost because it is a cost to them. So whereas you're looking at something, you're thinking how difficult, how long it's going to take to change that, ultimately that's cha-ching for the client. And that's not a good thing for them. It's not a good thing for working with you either. Changes take longer, updates become riskier, small design tweaks require touching multiple system points now rather than just the one nice, clear, defined system. So what looked like a flexible stack at launch quietly becomes a slower, more expensive system to maintain over time. And that's why maintenance is where stack decisions really kind of become real. Not on launch day. The real test for stack isn't launch day. It's like a year or two down when you're trying to maintain it. So just wondering what takes more energy in your work, in your stack right now? Is it the building the new websites or is it maintaining the existing ones? I'll take a wager it's maintaining the existing ones. Building something new is easy, but as you say, after a few years, is your WordPress dev stack still up to speed, or has it drifted to something completely different and difficult to maintain? So developers often look for the optimal stack, but really there isn't one. Every stack involves trade-offs. The real skill here is judgment. It's understanding what trade-offs that you're accepting, which ones that you need to avoid. What you say no to often shapes the system more than what you actually adopt and say yes and add on. So it's having that confidence to go back to the client and say, wait a minute, if we add this and that and this, then that's going to change these things, and over 6 months it's going to become a big monster. So let's have a sit down and think properly about this. So the real skill here is judgment. It's understanding what complexity you're introducing, what maintenance costs you're accepting, and what migration costs you're creating in the long term. The goal really isn't to choose a stack you'll never leave. It's to choose a stack that doesn't punish you when the ecosystem changes around it. So a calm stack fades into the background of your work. If your stack is constantly demands attention, it's already telling you something. Most developers try to choose the perfect stack, but experienced developers, they tend to choose the stack that feels gracefully. So thinking about 1-2 years time. And again, this is all evolution. It goes back to the timeline slide. I've evolved, I've moved things along as well. And as a developer, I've said to clients, look, this thing is no longer going to be supported in a year. Let's do a slow migration over to this new system. And that can be planned rather than it just happens one day and you're forced to do it. So just have a think about your development stack, have a think of how you use it today, have a think about how it's going to be used in 1-2 years' time. Is it still going to hold up? So hopefully this talk has been helpful to you. I know some might have expected me to tell you what stacks to use, what plugins to use, what themes to use. That wasn't really the point of this talk tonight. It was more about thinking how your WordPress stack is, how you use it, how you apply it, how it drifts and could evolve, and what it really means for the client when you're applying that stack, not just on launch day, but 1-2 years down the track. So I'll end there. Some discussion prompts if you want to put some stuff in chat, or if you want to unmic or ask me any questions. But where does your stack make you work easier? Where does it quietly slow you down? What part would you choose differently today if you had a choice? If you were to move your WordPress development stack, what would you change differently today and apply to a new build? So some discussions there. What I'll do is I'll just run through a couple of extra slides. That's me, WordPress dev since 2008, consultant developer, educator, trainer. I've got several websites. willbrown.com is my kind of freelance, that's my kind of education site to help WordPress freelancers. ZeroPointDevelopment.com is my consultancy, developer consultancy. I've got a WordPress maintenance company called WP-Wingman, and I've got something called the wasg.com.au, which is the website owner survival guide. So you can check out those later on. Next month, just as a reminder, I'm going to be talking about WordPress performance advice, but from a different angle, not just telling you what it is, telling you what people are currently recommending and why that's maybe not a good idea or maybe isn't the full truth. Phew, that felt a lot. So if you'd like, pop some things in the chat if you want to discuss, or unmic and ask me any questions. I'm happy to help you out, or even just your general thoughts on what the topic was for tonight. There's a few things in there. I'll just go through some of the things. Alan, yes, long time no see. I haven't seen you. You've not cammed up, but yes. And Pavel said, I use Elementor Pro still, or prefer clean Gutenberg. Yep. So I use that. I use Elementor Pro and Hello still. I do use Generate Blocks and Generate Press as well. This is the kind of hybrid approach, you kind of plugin era and then hybrid approach. Still very popular and relevant at the moment. Steph's asking, how has AI changed people's stacks? Yeah, that's a fair question. I think for that particular one, I think us as developers need to be moving because AI has made a significant change in the way that people build websites. It's easier for clients and individuals to build basic websites now. It's easier for them to try to make changes, code development themselves. But yes, we have to evolve as AI changes as well. But if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask them. Pop them in chat. I'll give everyone a few minutes. If there's nothing comes across, then I might just end the session. Oh, there you are, Alan. Yeah, nice to see you too. You're on mute, Alan, if you're trying to say something. Steph says, how has WP Core evolved? That's interesting because I've been writing about that recently, Steph. Core has evolved a lot in the last 6 or 8 years. It didn't evolve very much when I got into WordPress. There's always this don't touch core, don't add things to core. That's what plugins are for. Now we've seen lots of things being added in. The REST API kind of started that. And then we've got the Heartbeat API. And now there's all these different APIs that are being added in. And this new phase of Gutenberg is the real-time collaboration being added right into core. So it seemed to have evolved a lot over the last 6 or 8 years. And I think the evolution is going even faster at the moment. Definitely a good question. Alan, you were trying to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to ask my question. I started typing it, but I'll get rid of it. So I'm not a professional developer, although I did spend my whole life in IT, not in web development. And I look after the website for an association. So we're a not-for-profit. We're not a charity, but we try and keep our fees for our members down and stuff. We've got a website, and I've thought about changing it a few times. It was written by a professional developer in using Enfold theme.
Yep.
And then we've got a whole bunch of plugins added on, some of which may or may not be necessary because Enfold's got a whole heap of stuff. So I was just looking at your recommendation for now with Frost and GreenShift. One of the big questions is cost. I just had a quick look at GreenShift, and that says price is $99, but that's not very informative. It's probably $99 US. Is it per developer, per year, per website, per what?
Yeah. No, for GreenShift, that's definitely more of a developer agency thing.
Okay.
Pretty much everything is in US dollars per site per year.
I assume that site per year. Yeah. See, we wouldn't want to go that way. So we'll
they
probably
do have
be staying.
They do have a lifetime deal, which is about $399 US dollars, which I have purchased because it's something that I'm going to use for the next 2, 3, 4 years, and that goes back to that timeline thing. I used Genesis for about 4 years, 4 or 5 years. Elementor Pro, now that's coming up for about 5 years of using it. But I'm now thinking, and this is what the whole talk was about, thinking about what's happening now in the WordPress ecosphere, and there's a definite shift to block stuff. So if I want to future-proof my builds, I need to be embracing that. So this is where the whole stack comes in. I need to change my stack and have something I can offer to clients that their website's not going to be falling over in 3, 4 years when everyone else has moved onto block-based things. So that particular stack might not be the best for you, but at least it's got you thinking, what do I need to implement, in the next few years, or what do I need to plan to change over the next year so that my website doesn't fall over. I can still get developers to come in and change things.
Yep. Hey, can I pick your brain on one thing?
Yeah, go for it.
A membership add-on, plug-in, whatever. Any recommendations?
For membership, I tend to go with Members, which is a very lightweight membership plugin. It's actually called Members.
Okay.
And it gives you the very, very basic stuff. If you want something a little bit more robust, then MemberPress is good.
Okay.
Those are a couple of options there to have a look at.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, MemberPress is more your user interface. You have your different subscription levels and all that sort of thing. Members is a more simpler system. You define roles, and then you assign roles to people or content, and people can access it that way. The member press has got kind of a more polished system of working.
Yeah. Okay. The last bit might line with, we're thinking of things like content on our website that's restricted to members to see, and maybe even some sort of chat group type things, which, for members, taking it out of Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever.
Well, if you're looking for that all bundled in together, Steph's right in the chat. Buddy Press is something you probably want to have a look at. Well, maybe not Buddy Press. Buddy Boss is probably if you're looking at the top tier elite thing to go with, that's got everything in it.
Okay.
So it's got your forums, it's got your membership site, it's got all that sort of stuff on there. That would be a good thing to look at.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else have any other questions about the topic or anything WordPress? Nope, nothing's coming through in chat. Can't see anyone else coming up. So I'm going to ask everyone, I'm going to say to everyone, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I hope that was useful, talking about stack drift and future proofing and what's happened before and where things are going. Please join me next month if you're interested about WordPress performance. I'll be covering the whole topic, as many things as possible for those with a slight different angle. I like doing this different angle now. I'm right into this rather than just tell you what it is. I'll take you on a little journey. So thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
Alan,
you, Will.
Steph, Eva, Manuela, Martin, Takahiro as well. I'll post the slides to the meetup page. I'll bundle this up as a recording as well and put it up on YouTube for you to watch later on. So thank you, everyone. Good night and take care. And I'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Cheers, buddy.